Wonder, 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 wonder.
Welcome back to the podcast, Senora Vibes. This is season 11, episode 12. It is the last episode of the season, and it has really taken, I think, everything in me to be here today, because today's episode is one of probably the most difficult that I think I've ever recorded. And I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you for following me. Thank you for being a part of the podcast for the last 3.5 years. We started the podcast in March of 2020. COVID happened and I needed an outlet, and here we are today. What is this? November 2020. I'm here with my husband, Russ.
Hello, thanks for bringing me back again. At least only brings me back when I bring good wine.
Well, of course. I mean, why not, right? You're only here because you bring the good wine. So, by the way, I can't drink regular wine anymore because of this man. So, we better come through.
That's the way we roll.
So, it is the last episode of the season. It's been a very difficult season to record. It's been a really hard season for me. I think in terms of my life, I think this season of my life has been one of the hardest. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And it's about advocating for our family. It's about advocating for the elderly. It's about talking a little bit of how we want to take care of our loved ones at the end of life and at the end of their stage in life. So that's what we're here for, Husk. Are you ready?
I am ready. Always ready.
You know what? Babe, tell everybody what you're drinking today.
You're drinking.
They're always interested in what you're drinking.
You're drinking 2017 Alicante, which is a great rattle that is specific to Eastern Sicily, more specific to obviously the categories of it. It's an AOC. It's a white grape from Eastern Sicily, and it's really prominent out there, and it's really up and coming. It's a great value, quality price ratio that you get for this particular varietal. So 2017 Terra Nueve is the producer, and it's an Etna Bianco, the grape is Alicante.
Where can people buy it?
You can get it at the Houston Wine Merchant. You can get it at AOC, which is the retail operation of Texas Wine School. Possibly you could probably find it at Specs as well. Those are the two retailers.
What does AOC stand for?
Art of Cellaring. It's the retail wing of the Texas Wine School. It's where you can buy your wine there. They got a lot of talented people that work at AOC. Got a master sommelier, a couple advanced, one advanced sommelier, some WSET 4s, and so you can't go wrong by going to AOC and finding a bad bottle. It's all handcrafted and well curated products and producers that they.
And Rusk, you just completed a test for one of your Italian studies.
Right. So I started with the WSET program a few years back in 2020 when COVID hit. All the business kind of came to a lull in the action for a little while, so I needed something to keep myself busy. For the next 2 years, I went through the WSET courses and finally finished with a level 3, which was probably the most challenging. And then after I finished that, I did the scholar programs with the Wine Scholars Guild. I did Spanish first, which was about 6 months. And then after Spanish, I did French. And then after French, I did Sherry, which was a short program, very specific grape variety, a very specific region. Then I also did Texas, level 1. And now I just embarked on probably the longest of the 3 old world regions, Italy. It's split up in 2 sections, north and south. And most people take north first, but I always have to do things different because I just want to be different. And I decided to do south first. So I just finished south on Sunday, passed the exam. Now I probably embark on north next year, probably another 4 to 6 months, and hopefully wrap up Italy.
Well, that's amazing. I'm just so proud of you and everything that you've accomplished. You set your sights on learning about wine, and that's what you've been doing since 2020, January of 2020.
Yeah, you got to start something. You got to finish it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why we're finishing this season. Thank you for that right turn.
Yeah.
That segue right there, Rusk. So we're finishing off the season. We're finishing off where we started for season 11. We started the season in, I guess, August or September. And here we are, November of 2023. And to say that the last 6 weeks have been the most difficult of my life, I think is to say the least. I'm grateful to be here today to talk about it because it hasn't been easy. It's been actually pretty rough, but I think a lot of people don't realize. And I added this quote on my Instagram account the other day, and I think it's just so amazing that that some people captured the essence of the quote, because if you know me, you know that I probably don't share a lot of my private life. But one thing I did say in this quote, which is super accurate, was just because I carry it all so well doesn't mean it's not easy, or doesn't mean it's not heavy. Just because I carry it all so well doesn't mean it's not heavy. So it's just kind of talking about all the heaviness that's been happening. So as many of you know, I've talked about this in other episodes about the sandwich generation and those of us that are, Gen Xers that are taking care of our parents or taking care of our kids. Scoot over this way because we're on video. And so you can scoot over it all.
I did.
Half an inch.
That was 9 inches.
Okay. So, we did talk about how we take care of our parents, we take care of our kids. There's a lot of us that are in that sandwich generation. And I think one of the things that we don't want to discuss very much is end of life organizing, scheduling.
End of life care.
And healthcare for sure. So that's what I want to talk about today, because a week ago, today, October 31st, my mother passed away. She had been sick with a chronic disease for many, many years, for 5 years. We discovered she had liver disease in
2018.
January 2018. It was, and we discovered this, by the way, because my mother got lost going to Ross, and she couldn't make it home. She couldn't remember how to get home. And that's not Alzheimer's. That's not anything like that. It's a memory loss. What happens is her liver produced so much ammonia because it was already so sick that it infected her brain. So once the ammonia hits to your brain, it gives you like a memory fog.
Right.
It creates a loss of memory.
It clouded her judgment. It also clouded her memory.
Exactly. So she didn't know how to get back home. So for hours, we were looking around for her. We went everywhere. My father called all of his kids, his 2 girls and 2 boys. And he's like, I can't find Mom. I don't know where she went. I know that she went shopping somewhere. She was at the Ross parking lot the whole time, and she couldn't make it home, and she didn't remember how to make it home. Right. That's how we discovered that she was pretty sick, because she had severe memory fog, and that's the ammonia that goes from the liver to the brain, and it causes that memory loss. Right. So we took her straight to the hospital, Memorial Hermann at Spring Branch, and that's what they said. They said, your mother has cirrhosis, and I think it was stage 2. It wasn't like quite advanced yet.
I recall stage 2.
Right. So we, just followed the doctor's orders. This was 2018. This was January. We were ready to go off to a quinceañera in Paris in March, and she got herself together. She pulled it together, which is what she always did, and we headed out to Paris in 2018 for a quinceañera, and we had the best time. However, coming back, you have to remember that she's sick and she's got a chronic disease. By the way, liver disease is a chronic disease, and a lot of people think that you get cirrhosis of the liver just from drinking a lot or just partying and all that, but no, my mother had it And it was a fatty liver disease. So it can be NASH. It's non-alcoholic liver disease. So for her, it was more hereditary. Her father had issues with his liver. He had hepatitis a few times. He also was an alcoholic who also gave up drinking later in his life. We don't know what caused it. We really don't have an idea of what caused her liver disease. Right. We are just assuming that it was hereditary because she never had a drink in her life. Right. By the way, she hated drinking. She hated alcohol. Right. And it was more psychological for her. It wasn't a taste thing. She just hated the way that it caused her father to not be present in her life. And so I think that's where it came from. It was
mentally traumatic for your mother.
Yeah, it was mentally traumatic. So for her to die from a disease that her father, I guess, imposed on her was something very sad and very ironic.
It's very ironic. And I think that I think there was some speculation because your mother had chemo back in 2001 for, was it stage 1 or stage 2 breast cancer?
Stage 2B breast cancer.
So maybe there's a possibility that the chemo that she had gone through may have caused some damage to her liver.
We don't know.
We don't know. It's just speculation.
Yeah, it's speculation. I think we've all kind of assumed all different kinds of things, but just because I carry it all so well doesn't mean it's not heavy. That's a really important thing because, and it's a great quote for me because I always do carry a lot of stuff, and it's been 5 years of being at her beck and call because we've been on call for her, not only me, but my brothers and my sister. Because if she feels sick or something doesn't go right, or it can affect any possible part. The liver affects everything in your body, by the way.
That's what we learned.
Yeah, it affects not only your brain and your memory, because you can lose your memory and you can have, create
it's
fog.
It's the workhorse of the body.
It is the workhorse.
That's what the cardiovascular surgeon has said when your mom was in her final throes at the.
Yeah.
He said that a lot of people think it's the heart and it's the brain, but he said it's the liver has 400 to 500 different functions, and it's basically the power plant.
Right. So the one thing that I definitely want to go over today with you all is just sort of how we tackled her healthcare and what we learned from it, because it wasn't easy. It was something that we tackled quite frequently. And I feel like, and I tell Rusk at this time, like I felt like I was always sort of at her beck and call. I never really lived the last 5 years fully because I'm always waiting for that call where we're going to go pick her up and just take her to the hospital for some sort of, complication from the disease.
Yeah,
there could have been so many complications. It could have been gastritis and she was vomiting so much.
Right. Because it was one of those functions of the liver, right?
Exactly.
To contribute to the digestive system.
Right. She was on lactulose all the time, so she was having to drink that. And then her blood sugar was always going up, so she was either pre-diabetic or diabetic, so we always had to manage her diet.
Yeah, this last year was really tough.
It was very hard.
The previous 4 years or so were kind of were smooth sailing for a while, but when 2023 hit, it really amped up, and as the liver went into decline, and as the summer approached, the liver went to even further decline to the point where it was almost at the point where it was no longer working efficiently. I think the doctor had told me that it was up to like 20%, and then to the final 3 weeks when your mother was in the hospital right here in October. Yeah. I think it was down to like 5% efficiency was what the doctor had told me outside the room when I talked to him separately.
For sure. And I think the one thing I definitely want to just do a shout out to Willowbrook Methodist Hospital.
Yep.
They did an amazing job. My mom started at Memorial Hermann, and then she moved. That's why it keeps coming up in my mind. But she moved to the West Road area.
West Road area, right?
Jersey Village area.
Yeah, 290 Beltway guest.
Yeah, and then we moved her to that hospital over there. We moved her to Methodist Willowbrook, and they were fantastic. They were lovely. They were wonderful. And for all the times that we were there, they took care of her, and they were some of the best doctors I think we've ever talked to. But one of the things that I want to talk about is definitely give you some tips on how to talk to the doctors when you're going through this situation, because a lot of us are going to go through this situation, especially as our parents are growing older. Señoras out there, you're taking care of your parents, you're taking care of grandparents. Definitely when you're talking to doctors, and this is part of a handbook that I wrote about advocating for your family. I'm definitely saying for sure you need to speak with confidence. I think doctors want to know that you are there and you mean business, because a lot of times people walk in and doctors think that you're just somebody that doesn't know enough or doesn't have enough information. You have to come in with enough information about your patient, your family member. So talk with confidence, come in with a set of questions ready to go. Talk about the symptoms your family is experiencing, like documented. And I would talk to my mom, honestly, right before we head to the doctor. And I would say, Mom, what are you going through? Like, what are the things that you've been feeling? And I would document it and I would write it down in my phone, in my notes. And I would say, okay, doctor, this is what Mom has been feeling for the last, few weeks. So definitely come in with your symptoms. If you're meeting the doctor for the first time, Google the doctor and research them a little bit. Like get their background, know them a little bit.
Sure.
Find out who they are.
Yep.
Also, give them a list of immediate contacts, phone numbers, that kind of thing. If you're not feeling like, and also if you're not feeling like you're being heard, definitely change doctors. There's different doctors for different things. And if I felt like my mom wasn't being heard, I definitely asked for somebody else.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you and your sister particularly did a wonderful job of staying on top of your mom's healthcare needs. As far as I know, for the last 20 years, but you guys really stepped up these last 6 months or so, and then these last 3 weeks. And it's what they always say: it's an ounce of prevention's a pound of cure. And if you guys, I don't know, it's just like I haven't been through it.
Yeah.
I haven't been through it myself. My parents are kind of old too, but I'm pretty sure my parents' times are coming in the next few years. And
You've also had those moments when you have to go and pick up your mother from the doctor.
Yeah,
the
but
dentist.
it's never been anything serious. It's just been like minor stuff where she had earache and stuff like that.
I think if you are their caregiver, like definitely have a preparation checklist. Again, I have that on my website. Go over there, and I'm also going to link it on my podcast episode. There's a preparation checklist. I mean, I go back into like talking about the lab work that the people had. I always went in and I had like a list of the things that my mom had done. And one of the things that she always hated and was just the worst thing in the world was when she had to have blood drawn, because she didn't have veins in her arms that were easy to tap. So that was always an issue. So I always reviewed those things with the nurses that were going to tap her blood, because I always said to them, you have to be super extra gentle with her, because she, number one, is traumatized by it, because they poke her,
Right.
hurt her, she's traumatized. And number two, you have to use an ultrasound machine.
Yeah.
So you have to know your patient really well, so that when you get to the hospital, you get to the clinic or wherever you're going, that you advocate for them and say, you cannot get blood drawn from her unless you have an ultrasound machine, because you will not be able to get a vein. And if you try, you are going to torture my mother.
Right.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Do not torture my mom.
Yeah, your mom was tortured quite a bit this year.
Yeah, she was. And thankfully, she had people that would advocate for her. But at the end of the day, when she was there the last month and a half, we had to have a midline inserted in her arm, because we couldn't find a place for her.
Right.
So, have your checklist ready. Talk to those doctors. Be prepared for those moments and those big questions. I would say when you're in the hospital, be involved, speak to the doctors, speak to the nurses, and I go over what did they just have done, what was the exam, what did it say. The wonderful thing about Methodist Willowbrook is that we have a chart, and they would definitely put everything on her chart. So there's a My Chart. You log in, you go in there, and it gives you everything that they've had. All of their tests, everything that they've had.
The My Chart is very convenient.
I know, it's great. It's an amazing tool, so definitely stay on top of that. And then I also talk about like what to do when you're at the hospital with your family. The things that would make them happy and the things that would thrill them. I know that my mother loved when I would bring that tomato soup from La Madeleine.
Yeah.
And I warmed it up for her.
favorite.
She loved it.
Yeah.
And I know that her doctors didn't like the sodium. I know they didn't have, but you know what? At the end of stage, she just needed some relief and some something that made her happy.
Yeah, it's made her comfortable.
And it made her happy.
Kind of gave her some solace in the situation that she was in.
So, family support is super important, and I think one of the things that Rusk and I always talk about is, when you're going through a situation like this with your family, and you guys have extended family, or you're the caregiver, and you have a family of your own. Again, the sandwich generation, we're right in the middle, we're the little bologna between the two breads. I always had a really good one-on-one with Rusk about what was going on with my mom. That way he knew that I was required, that I needed to be there. If I couldn't be there, my sister was going to be there. If she couldn't be there, my brother was going to be there. But it's so important that you have that conversation with your family, especially when you're taking care of parents. And you also have that conversation with your own kids, because even though you think the kids are just going to function and it's all going to go well and it's going to be okay, the kids know what's going on.
Right. No, they were feeling it for sure. We were all feeling it, especially these last 3 weeks in October. It was intense for you. It was intense for your brothers and sisters. It was intense, obviously, for your father. Your father would call you several times a day. Yeah. He kind of felt helpless. You guys were helpless. We were helpless. We were kind of on pins and needles and on the edge, wondering, what's going on, because you had a job, you had to go to the hospital, you were trying to shuffle both. You were trying to also be a mother and a wife, and we were telling you we don't need you to be a mother and a wife right now. We need you to take care of your mother. We were trying to make those alleviate at least that part of the stress and make it easier. And we got this at home. And, it was a tough time these last 3 weeks, and especially the last 48 to 72 hours when the general physician had decided that oversaw all the specialists, and he had called in, and he had talked to you, and he said, you need to bring in your entire family to make a decision, because there isn't that much that we can do for your mother anymore. Yeah. She's at end stage liver disease. She had a hematoma that has started in her knee that has spread through her entire right leg and then into her back. And we kind of knew that we were approaching the end of your mom's life, and it was torturous for you. And we felt, the boys and I really felt sorry for you, because we couldn't do anything. We wanted you to be happy, and also to be aware of the realities of the situation at the same time.
Right.
So it was tough. I mean, it was tough to watch, especially somebody that, she was a great abuela. She was a great grandmother. She was a great wife. She was a great mother to you guys. She loved her grandkids. Her duty, her role in this world was to be a mother, to be,
that's all she wanted.
That's all she wanted to be. And she's exceeded that expectation. She was one of the best out there.
I agree. And I think one of the words that you mentioned earlier that I think it's important that we reiterate is you feel helpless. You feel helpless as much as you try to be on top of all the doctor's appointments, to be on top of her medicine, to make sure she's got her appointments, to make sure she's following her diet, to making sure that she's not doing anything that's going to be detrimental to her health. You feel helpless at the end of the day when she is sick at the hospital and you can't do anything about it. And I think that's the worst part for her caregivers. Her kids, is we saw how much suffering she had. So she was doing fine for 5 years, and until recently she started to deteriorate, and then she took a trip to Merida with my daddy, and she fell on one of her legs. So on her knee, on her right knee.
They did a tour out there, got on a double-decker bus, and she slipped, from what we've been told, and she hit the knee, and that's kind of where that was the beginning of the end, unfortunately for your mother, because she had no liver. And most healthy people, or somebody with a semi-functional liver, could probably bounce back from that, and she couldn't bounce back from it.
She couldn't.
But she was at that point, she was already at end stage, and that was, unfortunately, no pun intended, that was kind of the nail in the coffin.
That was the nail in the coffin, and that's really the catalyst that led to everything, because when she fell on that leg, she developed a hematoma, which is, when you get bruising and the bruising doesn't go away, and the blood causes swelling. It causes swelling, and the blood doesn't clot because her liver isn't clotting, and she's getting blood, and the blood still doesn't work. She got pints of blood at the hospital.
She was losing a liter of blood a day. Yeah. And what we learned was from the doctors is that the liver creates a hormone for the bone marrow to produce platelets to coagulate the blood. But as we also
Right.
learned that at that age, your bones, and I didn't know this, I thought your bone marrow existed throughout your bones through your whole life. As you get older, your bone marrows dwindle, and they only end up in the pelvic region. So,
Right.
so you're now the supply of bone marrow and the supply of platelets is now isolated to a very small portion of your body. So the probability of producing those platelets is now diminished, and I think that all kind of cascaded into a bad situation for your mother.
It did. It definitely was like a domino effect. And I think the fact that, she fell and she developed a hematoma, which ultimately her vascular doctor said she's not absorbing the blood.
Right.
When you get bruised, eventually your body just absorbs it because your liver is working overtime to absorb it. But hers wasn't, and when her liver started deteriorating, her kidney started deteriorating as well. So little by little, every single organ was not working anymore. So as we spoke to her doctors, we really just knew that this was sort of the end of the road for her. And so as you're thinking about, you're at the doctors, that it's kind of leading at the end of the road. The one thing I definitely want to recommend, and it's something that my mother did in 2021, is that she and I both contacted a lawyer, and we really did set up a trust and a will. And we had a conversation with our lawyer, Mitzi Rivero. She was our lawyer. She was fantastic and a lovely lady who was super patient with my parents. And she created a will for us. And we really had a conversation about what's going to happen at the end of life. And the one thing about my mother that I love, and it was a gift that she gave me at the end of life, is she made it all very easy and seamless for us to be able to handle all of her end of life care, because she said, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And she had that conversation with us. She had that conversation with me. She set me up as an executor of her will. And so when we spoke to Mitzi, she said to Mitzi, this is what I want when the end of life. We talked about end of life care. We talked about a do not resuscitate. We talked about who's going to take over her passwords, who's going to take over her bank account, how are we paying for her funeral, which, by the way, she did not want a funeral, so we did not have that. And at the end of the day, she paid for her crematorium, and that was it. She said she just wanted a celebration of life because she wasn't sad. She lived her life fully and happily. So she did not want anybody crying at a funeral or anything like that. She was the most pragmatic, beautiful woman that you could ever imagine. And I'm so grateful for that, because those are the lessons that I still take on with me, because we followed everything to the T. So at the end of the day, October 31st is when she passed, and we were called upon her home because my brother was there with her. Again, we had all taken turns taking care of her. We were finally at hospice care, which I want to just mention. Silverado Hospice Care was fantastic, and they were lovely. As I was talking to them, I gave them our directives for the physicians. I gave them the directives for the family and surrogates. I told them about my mother's DNR, so she had all of that. So make sure you have all of those documents ready to go, because when they pass, at the end of the day, you do have to call 911, or a doctor needs to come in and certify their death.
Yeah, I've never had anybody close pass to me. I don't have a large family in Houston, so it was a little bit of a learning lesson of how this process works. And it's great that Alicia's parents and her brothers and sisters they all get along, which is fantastic. It's so many times that you don't see siblings, and there's a lot of rivalry and a lot of dispute and vitriol that goes on. But that's not the case in Alicia's family. So that made for a lot more of a seamless process. But the fact that they had everything prepared ahead of time also made it for a very seamless process. Unfortunately, we're all heading in that direction one day, and why make it difficult on the people that love you by not being prepared for it? And the fact that they had the DNR, that they had the directives, that it was all kind of arranged. The will was set up, and it'll a lot of time. I read in the business section. I follow this estate planner guy, and the stories that he retells in his article of all the people that don't have this stuff prepared, and the complications and the difficulties. And it's already a bad situation to begin with, and why make the situation worse?
Absolutely.
Because it's already, it's traumatic, it's sad, it's depressing, it's not anything of the positive nature. And if you don't you don't prepare yourself for these kinds of things, it made it easier. So they were all ready to go. So as soon as Alicia's mom passed in that afternoon,
Yeah.
we were advised to call 911. You know, the paramedics showed up. They did their thing to confirm death. And then the hospice care had filled out some paperwork. And then the next thing was on to the funeral home. They were there within an hour. And her intentions were very clear. She didn't want a funeral. She wanted
Right.
cremation,
Yes.
and nothing fancy, no frills. But to each his own on how they want to handle their death.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that these things were handled ahead of time, because trying to scramble to do all this the last minute, especially the DNR and the directive, is huge, because that's one thing that we kept getting asked for was, did you have a DNR? And then when we produced it, do you have a directive?
Yes.
And Alicia had all that paperwork ready to
Yes.
go. We handed it to the hospice. We handed it to the paramedics. We handed it to the funeral. And I think it was a funeral home. I lost track of who all we handed it to. But it was asked.
No, it's a lot. Yeah.
It was asked several times. And, just it makes for a lot easier process in such a traumatic and saddening and depressing situation.
Definitely important that you really have that conversation ahead of time, because I'm just looking at the dates for our directive, and it was signed in February, and it was February of 2022. So this is literally a year and a half ago when we signed all these documents, February 2nd, 2022. And it's directives to physicians, and it does say terminal condition. I request that all treatments other than those needed to keep me comfortable be discontinued or withheld, and my physician allow me to die as gently as possible. And that is something that she signed, and it's here, and I have that because I made sure, and I knew I had to have that conversation with my parents, because it's important